Welcome to The Edge, our podcast on everything leadership and teams. I'm Jenny Miller. I'm one of the co-founders of Management Dynamics, a small but mighty consultancy firm specialising in leadership and teams. Also a co-host of this podcast together with my colleague Alison Grieve. Ali, say hi.
Hi, I'm Alison Grieve, passionate about teams, but also really looking forward to our guest speaker today, Philippe Buyze, a person who expressed himself as someone who takes the sand from shoes of the people in teams. I love that analogy, and I'm looking forward to digging into it some more. But Philippe is a fabulous team coach, supervisor, and facilitator with over 30 years experience working across the world. He's adaptable and flexible, moved house at least 15 times, he said. And we've been really looking forward to meeting you again, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Alison and Jenny. It's really a pleasure. And thanks for the introduction. It's always surprising when you hear from others about yourself.
So tell us a bit more about why you're so passionate about teams, Philippe. I know we talk about it a lot, but what is it that kind of lights the fire for you?
In fact, my passion for teams came from when I worked in big international companies where, with the difference of cultures, you see how the team dynamic, how you can help a team really to be what we call a high-performing team, which does not happen in, like an injection or a training or whatever. I would say it's some team building exercises, but it's really helping the team to discover their differences, to discover the emotional intelligence that can be used within the team to have this 1 + 1 is 3. And just imagine what it gives when it's a team of 8 or 10 persons. And the really fun of it is when you begin to work with a team, when you think about in a systemic way, which means that it's not the team on itself, because you can make a huge, you can make a team really working very well, but not, I would say, aligned with the rest of the organization or the system. And so, manufacturing can do very well, but marketing is not happy, and so that does not work. The silos, we've heard all about that. So approaching the teamwork in a systemic way makes really the magic for the benefit of the team and the company. And that makes it more sustainable as well. That's the fun of it. So I love that. And that's why I take out this sand off their shoes, in fact, so that they can run faster and longer further away.
Nice. And so what are some of the things that has drawn you to that systemic approach? How did you get into it in the first place, Philippe?
This could go very far because I'm an engineer, and I'm a robotics research. I was a robotics research and worked on automation. And automation, to make it very simple, you want to automate something, so it's a black box. So you stimulate the black box, you see what's the output, and based on that, you make a regulation. In fact, it's kind of systems, you look to systems. And in fact, when you do coaching, even on a one-on-one coaching, also even more with a team, because you have even more variables, dynamics, you also stimulate the team through questions, through some experiential exercises, so embodiment exercise or whatsoever. You see what the dynamic is coming out of that. But it's not for us to make sense of it. It's for the team to make sense of it. So what came from, I would say, my earlier studies in engineering is in fact a certain approach or logic or whatever, a mindset framework to help the teams in.
And that sounds like it's a bit of an less of the scientists doing an experiment on the team. It's more the team doing the experiment on themselves that you're just facilitating and then enabling them to get insight from. Is that?
Absolutely, because the biggest important thing is that the team learns from that and can continue to learn even when I am not there. So it's kind of being a catalyst. So you're part of the reaction, but you are not, in the reaction yourself. So you get out of that, so that they can become autonomous, because that's the most thing. It's kind of revealing. It's also acting as a mirror, of course. It's a kind of revealing the team, maybe something that was more in the shadow, or things that is very strong and that they underutilize or that they could use more. It works very well, I would say, with teams, and even more with teams from different cultures. Because you have those different lenses, frames, that biases that could also be making those shadows. and that you want to put more light on.
And how did you get into this in the first place, Philippe? What there's a kind of a massive gap in my mind anyway, between engineer and team coach, and all the other things that you do as well, you know, your coach supervision and so on. How did you get from engineer to here?
So I had the benefit of being in a company where I could move from engineer to HR. Yeah. So I moved to HR, started with recruitment. That was my school of asking open questions, of being able to give feedback to people, of assessing potential of people and so on. And I had to work very rapidly facilitating internal team sessions, trainings, and I saw dynamics going on. I was involved in the internal coaching since, let's say, 2002 in the company. And so I love that. And since then, I have always been in coaching. And as you go in coaching, you learn a lot about yourself. And then you also, through different schools, and I went to Ashridge, to different schools, you learn a lot about the relationships, the importance of the connection of the relationships. And part of those relationships is the system, is the relationship with the team members, with the outsiders, with the suppliers, with other stakeholders. And so that's where it really connected with my background and my past. And that's how I worked on this. And so worked through different trainings and others, and reading and practicing, because what we do is a lot by practicing, in fact.
So Philippe, how do you start taking a systemic approach with a team?
That's a very good question. In fact, it starts as you get onboarded by the client. Sometimes we say that the team coaching starts when you're being approached, even by email. You know, the way you think about your client starts already there. So we could say a lot about that. And in fact, it starts with, I would say, the first conversation and the contracting conversation you have with the client. Could be the CEO, could be the leader, could be the HR, about what is team coaching or not. Because sometimes there is a misunderstanding about what it is, and it's quite important to make the difference. Why is that? And I saw it lately again, is that could be quite confronting for the team, in fact, to have a question at some moment to say, I see we are doing this kind of exercise. And in fact, nobody speaks. What does that tell about the way you are functioning? So the contracting is quite important at the beginning. And also to say that whatever they want to improve, get better at, being a high-performing team, it can never be at the detriment of the rest of the system. And so they say, what is that? And so you explain about, either different parts of the organization or the supply chain they are in, or whatever, their customer, their suppliers. And that helps them to understand, okay, what it means. The most important for me is that the leader of that team is able to explain to his or her team what the session will be and what it will not be, so that it's not coming from me, but it comes from the credibility inside the organization about what it is. And then when they come in, after a few maybe warm-up exercises, usually I ask them about, if you think about the different stakeholders, who are they? Suppliers, clients, team members. Okay. Well, if you put now on a post-it what you think they like you to work on today, what would that be? Usually there's a big silence. Some people are rolling their eyes and saying, oh, what is this? And then silence always helps, because people like to fill in silence. And so either stickies, and then they put it on, and then we have fantastic conversation. Because in fact, it's not centered on the team for the team, but on the team for the system and the organization. And that will make it very much more sustainable than just focusing on the nitty-gritties of something to fix in the team. Mm-hmm. When a team is successful, usually you don't have problems in the interactions. You don't have trust problems because they are successful, they know how to work. So usually when you start the question about how can we improve trust in the team, well, we try to fix something in the nitty-gritty without thinking about the system. That means that most of the time it's not sustainable. Could be an opening door for something more, but that's the difference. So long story there.
But a lovely story. And I think both Jenny and I have, particularly when you start talking about trust, have both had experiences of teams who've said to us, oh, we want you to come in and we want to work on trust. And, for us, just as for you, it's a systemic thing. And it's not something that is quickly just switch on with a couple of hours or a half day or even 2 days together. It's something that's cumulative and needs to be built on over time. And you need to be considering all the other parts that contribute to the system. How do you help people think about all those different parts that they need to consider?
Well, for me, it starts also with the contracting within the room about confidentiality, about ethics. So I'm certified in ICF, so I speak about, the code of ethics and so on, which is important. And also to agree that everything will stay in those 6 walls, taking, the floor and the ceiling. And sometimes I even do a little exercise when it's the first time I have a team, which is that they bring something that's really special for them and are, I would say, able to share, to say something that nobody knows. This kinds of creates a different connection. So it creates a connection not from the finance manager to the other director or whoever, but it's from Joe to Jane. It's from human to human. So they connect not only with the brain, but they connect a bit more with the heart and as people. And that makes already a difference in the way then we can have conversation on situations that are challenging or difference in communication. And of course, we can use, MBTI, DISC, all those different frameworks that help to understand for the brain the different preferences. But it's more to come back to a more of an emotional intelligence state where they see what is there, who is there, what they bring to the team, and what they couldn't get from the team as well. And when you get at that stage, trust means something totally different then. It brings it to a different level, not an intellectual level or to some stories that you didn't say this, you didn't, sign this off or whatsoever, or silos.
So, Philippe, when you're working within a system, and I love the point that you said that that it won't be at the detriment to the wider system as well. How do you know if you're touching on the boundaries of that? Because that can feel a bit scary for teams.
Yes, and that's why you cannot do it in one shot, I would say. And it depends, of course, of what is there, the maturity of the system, maturity of the team, how far they already are able to discuss what's difficult, to put it on the table, to discuss between them. So how much is there a feedback culture or not? And so when you use sometimes you use a quite of a, I would say, an exercise, a physical exercise. I think some call it the boat, some call it the magic carpet. I don't know if you know, but it's, a piece of cloth. Everybody needs to stand on it, and then you reduce the size of the cloth. And they find that fun. But in fact, what happens is a very, I would say, image about the reality, and also about the boundaries, about where people feel comfortable or not in certain situations. And so when you debrief that exercise about what does that tell about, in stress situation, in business challenging situation, how is that similar or not? That's where sometimes you begin to touch on some of the difficult boundaries, or about the things that are what I would call the elephant in the room. So we bring the elephant in the room, we'll eat it piece by piece, we don't take it in there fully. And I think this is how you get to touch it. Sometimes it's also about using Post-its, put it in a hat about things that so far we never discussed. Post it on a Post-it, and then we take it out of the hat. We don't know who wrote it. We say, okay, so if that would be something that never was discussed, what makes that you would like to discuss it today? What brings it to, at the table today? So this is something that we could use. by having this kind of 360 degree of the stakeholders, and you do that on a regular basis, by definition, you will feel where people gently, easily speak about it or not. That's where our senses and our intuition will work a lot. For me, team coaching is like, I call that the mirror ball, because we have the visibility of different parts of the system at the same time. They also play mirrors, all the team members, to ourselves in a way. So that's why it's also much more confronting for us as a team coach, because in fact we have all these different energies and different connections from the team defending themselves, and you are the outsider one way or the other. So creating that partnership, creating that relationship is so important from the beginning, so that you are able to do, I don't know if it works in English, but benevolent confrontation. You said to the team, you said you want to work on this, but so far when you discuss about that, I only hear Joe and Jane about this and nobody else. So what does that tell? And you are not able to do that if you have not been able to partner with them. So it's that partnering that helps the team to go further, to go like in a mountain on maybe a little road that is a bit scary, but they know you're there, that you hold the space for them so that they can go further and maybe find out that there is no fear. They could do it. And that's when they go further. And that's for the benefit of the whole team, of course.
And as you were talking there, Philippe, I was thinking about how you stay as far removed from the system as you possibly can. So you don't insert yourself into the system as the coach, so that you can serve them in the best way. How do you manage that? It sounds like, you're doing some quite in-depth exercises there. You're doing the benevolent confrontation and kind of giving them that feedback. That must kind of bring you closer to a team. So how do you keep that distance that's needed?
That's an excellent question, because there are different schools in this. The school I'm coming from is that, for example, I will speak to the CEO or to the leader of the team, but I will not have individual interviews of different people. Because when I begin to have interviews of the different people, I become part of the system, because people will give me information from the other or the one or the other. And in the room, if something happens, I could have Joe again looking at me and saying, you've seen that. And so I have a different position. The difficulty with team coaching is exactly that, is to be able to be very, very close and partner with the team. But the team is like one person, is like one client. I'm not too close to each of the individuals. I'm close to the team and the team dynamics, which means sometimes that I would say, when they say, well, come with us for dinner, I would say, no. I need to be on my own. I need to reflect. I need, I'm more of an introvert, so I need some time, to recharge my batteries, whatever excuse I will find. But in fact, the problem is not that I don't want to eat with them, is that I cannot be too close and eating with 2 or 3 of the team members. That will change the dynamic.
Yeah.
So as much as I can coach the leader, I cannot coach the individuals of that team. So that's the way I would say I'm trying to handle it.
I had a similar conversation just this afternoon, actually, with a team that I'm working with later this week. And the leader said, we're going off for dinner afterwards. Would you like to join us? And I actually said the honest truth, which was, no, thank you so much. I'd like to give that time to you to bond as a team. And you'll feel like I'm observing you if I'm there, which is true, right? And you're right. You can only sit at one end of the table. You can't sit really, unless there's very few of you. And so the chances are that you'll have a deeper conversation with 2 or 3 of them and not all of them. And that creates a different dynamic in the team, doesn't it? Between you and the team anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember I said no to a client because he wanted that I interviewed everybody. There were some problems in the teams and so on. They say, no, you should interview them. I say, no, I don't want to. He said, well, then I will not choose you. I say, okay, that's fine. And then he came back 3 months later and say, fully understand now. Because we had somebody intervening and in fact it didn't work and it was exactly what you said. And so I prefer, this is part of so maybe the role we have as well, and also to, I would say, for the benefit of our client and for our profession, is to be able to say no. And it's kind of, I would call it education, but I don't know, there is maybe a better word, is to explain for people to represent themselves what it is not. And we go through this many times, so we have a different experience in this, of course. But it's important also to share to our clients. It's about managing expectations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes there are expectations, aren't there, of, that sort of discovery, getting to know people, having those one-on-one interviews before and spending time with the leader and everything. But as you say, that starts to reshape the connections in the team and starts to entangle you as a team coach. And if your ultimate client is the intact team, rather than seeing them as individuals, so it's actually in service of the system of that team rather than the group of individuals, then you are putting yourself in quite a challenging place to hold that stance as the team coach if you're doing that. And I do sort of question myself sometimes when I know desperately I want to go and meet everybody and get to know them, but that's more to do with me being nosy and liking to build relationships. When I have to challenge myself and go, no, the service of the team is better if you show up with the team and then they see that actually you're not entangled with any single individuals more than any others.
Yeah, and that's very important. And it could even play because of course, when you speak a lot more with the leader and sometimes you coach even the leader, so you have a kind of the intensity of the quality of the relationship is a bit higher maybe with the leader than with the rest of the team. So it's quite important when you have the intact team that you use the intact team with the leader in the team as it is, and you don't have too many eye contacts only with the leader, because then you would be kind of playing something that has been foreseen in advance. And it's much more about in the fluidity of what is going on now, in the here and now, being very present, like the water is taking the space as it is, and whatever container you have, it's really using that mindset. It is using the intact team and putting away, of course, our own stuff, but also everything that's very linked to the leader, you take it out because you want to see the leader as well interacting with the team. And that's where sometimes observation of the team after a few sessions can be quite interesting as well. From distance or present, and of course discussing how to intervene or not and so on. But it's part also of looking to a leader and how it functions. I had to observe a full day a couple of weeks ago, a leader during the full day, and then discuss with him what I observed. And it's quite interesting to see the leader in different teams, internal, external, with some of his team members, some external persons that have different political levels and so on, and see the different facets of the person and being able then to come back to him to what I observed. No conclusions, this is what I observed. And based on that, see, that's maybe a pattern, maybe there's something I need to work on, because the person is not, does not know, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's the lovely role that a team coach can play, isn't it? Of holding up the mirror. I have to do this when I hold up the mirror. Say hold up the mirror because it's like my symbol for it. So helping the team to notice what's going on that they otherwise just wouldn't be aware of, helping the leader to do the same, notice the patterns of behavior that they have, and then either choose to continue doing that because it serves them or to change it because it doesn't and do something different. And that's I think such a powerful process of and then teaching them to be able to do that for themselves eventually, so they no longer need us to do it for them. How do you create those moments of holding up the mirror, Philippe? What kinds of things do you do with the team?
So first I always contract about can I intervene on the moment? Or do you prefer me to intervene at the end? Because sometimes there are some I would say some specific topics. And if they say you can intervene at the end, I say, and if there is something really important that is there, can I just do this? And we do that. I do only it when it's really, really important. And usually they say yes. But the fact that they say yes is part of the game. And then it's really when knowing well what they want to work on, you observe and you see, the different exercises, the different disciplines they put in it, or having rotating roles whatsoever. Or you see some behavior about complaining or, dismissing things, and on the moment, really using this mirror, but just putting a question. Reflect back on who said what in the last 10 seconds, what happened? How does it feel? If you reflect back on what we did and said in the workshop over there, or the team coaching in a certain place, what is coming up? What does that tell about your current situation? Bit of silence, and then they begin to speak. So it's kind of creating a meta moment. I don't know if that works. Kind of a meta moment to reflect on the way we work together. And it's more about processing about what is going on in terms of dynamic.
So it's looking at it from a different perspective. That's what you mean by meta, isn't it? It's looking from a higher level, taking it to the next level above, helicopter view, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that usually makes quite a difference. And sometimes for some teams, something very simple, and something that I learned a long time ago, is by the end of the meeting is you're just using our fingers and putting the question. So how did we listen today in our team meeting? And so they can vote 1, 2, 4, or 5, but not 3, not in the middle. 1 is very low, 5 is very high. Everybody put their hand at behind their back, and then they lift it off. And then you see 1, 2s, or 3, or 4, or 5s. And then you ask them, why a 4? Why a 2? And based on that, what happens is the last 5 minutes, they reflect on what was working well or not so well, and it sticks in the mind for the next meeting. And that makes the autonomy then of the team, and they can continue to work on, because that's the most important, is that they learn new practices on coaching themselves on the processes, not coaching in interpersonal problems, because that should not happen at those levels, but more coaching about the way they work together and how they can make better decisions, because it's all about business and business results. Sorry.
No, I was just going to build on that and say it sounds like that process of coaching themselves, and to start with, you're doing it right. You're coaching them on the process. Is little moments of insight, isn't it, or opportunities for insights, like that piece that you just said around, how did we listen in that team meeting? Is just one small example of what they could look at.
Yes.
But getting them to practice that probably, I assume, builds a muscle that they should be able to now do any team meeting. They could do a quick round robin at the end of a meeting and just check in on how did we listen to each other, or how present were we, or what was the quality of our decision making, and so on. Right? There's so many places that format could go to.
Yeah. In fact, what we help them to do is to be able to use, I would say, 5% of their processor, and maybe 5% of this processor, to connect with what is going on now. Not so being in the conversation, but at the same time, like we do here, who is speaking, who is not speaking, is somebody nodding or not? How do we connect for the moment? And not only what is the story I want to sell, because it's not my story. It's it's something we co-create together.
Yeah, I like what you said about it. Working with teams here at a systemic level is more about working on their team processes rather than on their interpersonal relationships. And so, getting the team to think much more about the structures that they're putting in place to work on. And I think that's a much more useful way for us to think about, people get uncomfortable, don't they, when it's like, oh, we're going to build on our interpersonal skills or talk about our personalities, and they feel like they're being stripped bare or will feel unsafe. Whereas if it's more about how we work together rather than who we are, it feels different and more effective. Have you got another example that you can share with us of where you've been doing that and how it worked out?
In fact, I've been doing this and with several clients, and I just think about one client where there was a big business challenge So that was a regional exec team, and business was not going so well. There were quite some tensions within the team because some people were there since a long time and they knew how to do it, and new members were coming and they said, no, we should do it differently, the typical story. And it was in 1 year's time, we could take the decision to close the business in that region. And so you could start from working on the personal relationships and all of that. But again, that's not a systemic perspective, you know. You try to fix the team, but the business is still doing bad. And I come from, I would say, I learned to work more with the business as a partner as HR than working for HR with HR, you know. And when you come with that kind of situation, the focus is really about what's the outside, what's the business challenge, what are your different interdependencies between yourselves. So we really think about the two hats that they have. Yes, you are responsible for marketing, but you're also part of this leadership team. So part of that leadership team hat on, which is also your accountability. How much time do you devote to that? What is it you need to work on? The communication you have to have, the conversation, the knowledge sharing, and so on. And based on that, in fact, it does not go to, I have a problem between Joe and Jane. It's, we have a problem together with that client, with the business, the fact that we would close the business here and have so many people to lay off and so on. We have something in common. So it brings them back to something that they have in common. And then we can work on processes. And through that, you ease a bit the tension, and then you can work a bit more on the relationship, but that comes naturally at the right moment. It's like you make mayonnaise. If everything has different temperature, it doesn't work. You need to have everything at the same temperature, and then it's very nice and it's so simple.
I didn't know that about mayonnaise. That's probably where I've been going wrong all these years.
There's a new analogy. Teams are like mayonnaise.
Yeah, there we go. And Philippe, how do you get over the sense of complexity that I think a lot of teams face when they start working on team development? They kind of go, look, I'm just an individual at the moment. I can cope with that. I've got a lot to do. I'm working really hard for this organization by just trying to achieve my objectives. And now you're asking me to be a part of a team. And I've got to have all these relationships with all these people, and we've got to kind of come up with team accountabilities, and we've got to get really good levels of trust happening. This sounds complex. It also sounds like quite a lot of hard work. How do you work with a team with that mindset? Because my experience is quite common. It's certainly there's a starting point, right?
And in fact, it's the fact that they need to realize that they have those two hats and that they are not alone. Yeah. Because if they think about their own job and that hat that is very important, departmental, director or whatsoever, they focus too much on that and maybe don't give enough energy to the rest of the team. So by feeling that they are part of the team and that they give to the team, but they can also receive from the team, that they are not alone, that they have sparring partners to discuss, sometimes to negotiate. Yeah, that's normal. That's part of the resourcing, negotiation, and so on, getting results together. So when you bring them to that level of consideration, and then where they need to be discussing or not. So we're speaking about interdependencies. What are the key priorities where they cannot decide on their own or where they cannot deliver on their own? And what process do they use to make the best decision, informed decision at that moment? With speed, with agility. How do they do that? And then they begin to see that, in fact, well, if I find it complex, it's because maybe I don't know enough about what the others do, what they can bring to me, what I can bring to them. And so that's where you give them you open the window about other possibilities. And that's what we do in coaching. We try to bring people in different, angles so that they see the problem from a different angle and they see other solutions. It's exactly the same with a team.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates so much. So many teams that Jenni and I work with don't have an aspiration of team achievement. They're so bogged down in their own work in the day-to-day that helping them think about what could be done and what could feel just as important, different, if they got together and collaborated and somehow, unleashed that energy that you can get from the power of the team. And it's not about working more, it's actually about working smarter, because you're using all of that combined energy. And I think, people kind of logically get it, but there's still a fear in many leaders and teams that I work with who are like, yeah, we can hear the logic, but actually what seems to come out of this is just more tasks and work. So how do we actually somehow get it to be smarter? How do you approach that with teams?
Well, to get it smarter, usually it starts sometimes by spending a bit of time about what is their reason to exist for the team. And we can be surprised by the different views and the different challenges that people see that are quite different from each other. And having that aligned about what is really what that team can do, they don't have to invent it, the reason to exist. If there is a team, it means that the reason already exists. It's for them to maybe better discover it. And again, maybe speak to more stakeholders about understanding better what is expected from them. And not discovering and not making it up, I would say, as a team about that. And that makes usually a big difference. And once that is there, then if they stay on the team because they want to bite the bullet, then usually that makes a big difference. And that's where also they want to get some help. So sometimes in team coaching, we can introduce some methodologies or whatsoever to help them a certain framework. And I think about Advantix, for example, that can be very useful to also get some measurements, because that helps also the business to see progress, to foster the conversation on some topics, to prioritize as well. That helps as well to diminish the numbers of tasks and priorities, I would say.
So it sounds like there's something there about helping the team to not see it as complex, to see it as a simpler way of working, that it doesn't go to that kind of complex place, because actually that's overwhelming in some way.
Yeah, my analogy I like a lot with analogies is first time I was moving to London, I had my A to Z, I don't know if it still exists.
We all had one of those at one point.
Okay. And I was starting from the hotel, and then I was, going to by foot. I was discovering the roads around me, and then taking some, tubes and going from one there. And over the time, I built up my view of London in my mind. And so I could manage that complexity, but at the beginning I was incapable of doing it. And I think for a team is exactly the same. You start from really what's at core, and what's at core is who is there. Is everybody there? If somebody is not there, there is an empty chair to represent that person. What's our reason to exist? What are the supporting mechanisms for us to work? And so you build, and in fact, you build as the need comes to additional elements. But you cannot have, I would say, kind of an airplane checklist, to say, well, do you have all these? That does not work. And it depends again about the team, what they want and where they are. So it's really, so there is no recipe that we can use in team coaching. It's really what is there and what is there today. You can maybe have worked 2 or 3 weeks ago with a team. You come to the session today and something totally different is there. Perfect. Let's use that. That's using the system.
I was just going to say, that's what I absolutely love about teams. I love the kind of the fact that you could turn up to a team session and it's completely different and something quite massive has shifted. And it's just not, you weren't expecting it, and you have to, just work with it and appreciate it for what it is, and just go from where the team is at and go, edging towards something with the team as well. It keeps us interested, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And sometimes the team goes back in a way, it goes to old habits because something is there, and that's super useful, because that shows that in fact and you help the team to see what is going now, because you've made such a progress, and now you're so-called going backwards. What's in the system that makes you going back to old habits, to where you were comfortable in the past? What is going on now? What do you learn from this? Because it's all about learning as a team as well. And in fact, what we do with that, because I'm also a supervisor, in fact, you build the internal supervisor of everybody and the team itself. So they begin to ask different questions to themselves about their functioning, how they work, how they feel, how they connect. And it brings a different dimension in the conversation.
And when do you think when do you know that you've succeeded as a team coach with a team? What's some of the things that you look for that suggest that?
I would say for me, it's when the team, from what they decided to get, where their objective, let's say, and when they say, I think we are good there. What's really important is while we always speak about beginnings and endings in individual coaching, it's exactly the same also in team coaching. It's quite important that we are not lasting too long, because in fact they become dependent. And so what is a role that we play? What do we fill in that they don't want to fill in? So this is also part, I would say, of the process when we, I don't know, contracted for 9 months, 12 months, depending of the team, is that a few sessions beforehand, you say, okay, in about a couple of sessions from now on, you'll be on your own. So what do you need to work on now so that you can be able to work on your own and I'm not there anymore? We could recontract for another later stage for something else, but it's important that we finish this journey, finish this process together.
Philippe, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I've personally really I enjoy all our conversations always. I mean, you and I do supervision regularly and always I get a huge amount out of our conversations. And I've really enjoyed today as well, exploring your thought processes behind your team coaching practice. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure indeed. And it's a pleasure to have those conversations, because I think there's so much to learn from each other and also to share.
Yeah. Thank you.